The first attack came without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning. Ambassador Krelvex of the Dominion stood on the observation deck of his flagship and watched the blue planet below. Earth, the humans called it, such a small world, such a young species. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were nothing special in the vast tapestry of galactic civilizations. They were simply the next target. "Begin the bombardment," Krelvex said. His voice was calm and measured. This was not personal. This was simply how the galaxy worked. The strong consumed the weak. The Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years by following this simple truth. Every species that rose to challenge them was crushed. Every world that resisted was burned. This was the natural order of things, and Krelvex saw no reason why Earth would be any different. The first wave of plasma bombs fell on the major cities. New York vanished in a pillar of fire that could be seen from space. Tokyo followed moments later, then London, then Beijing, then Mumbai. The attacks were precise and devastating. Military installations were targeted first, then communication centers, then population centers. In the span of 3 hours, 2 billion humans died. The fire spread across continents, turning day into night as ash and smoke filled the atmosphere. Krelvex watched it all with the detachment of a farmer burning weeds. He expected surrender within days. Every species surrendered after such destruction. The Velari had surrendered after losing one city. The Thornax had begged for mercy after a single orbital strike. The Kelvari had simply given up when they saw the Dominion fleet arrive. Humans would be no different. They would weep and beg and offer anything for survival. Then the Dominion would take what it wanted and move on to the next conquest. He was wrong, so very wrong. 3 days after the attack, a small human ship appeared near the Dominion fleet. It was barely the size of a shuttle, held together with emergency repairs and desperate hope. The weapons officer laughed when he saw it on the scanner. It posed no threat. It was barely capable of flying. "Should I destroy it, Ambassador?" he asked, already reaching for the firing controls. "No," Krelvex said. He was curious despite himself. "Let them speak. Let us hear what pathetic plea they have prepared." The communication screen flickered to life. A human female appeared on the display. Her face was covered in ashen burns, her uniform torn and stained with blood. Behind her, Krelvex could see the ruins of what had once been a great city. Smoke filled the sky and fires still burned on the horizon. She looked like she had crawled through hell to reach this ship. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the woman said. Her voice did not shake, her eyes did not waver. She stared directly into the camera as if she could see Krelvex himself. "You have killed billions of our people. You have destroyed our cities. You have burned our world. You have taken everything from us." Krelvex waited for the plea for mercy. It always came at this point. The tears, the bargaining, the desperate offers of surrender and submission. He had heard it 1,000 times from 1,000 species. "We do not surrender," Admiral Chen said. Her voice was like steel, cold and unyielding. "We do not forgive and we do not forget. This is not a negotiation. This is not a plea. This is a promise. We will find you. We will hunt you across every star system in this galaxy, and we will make you pay for every single life you have taken. Remember my face, Ambassador. Remember my voice, because I swear on the ashes of my world that you will see me again." The communication ended abruptly, leaving only static on the screen. Krelvex stared at the empty display for a long moment. Something cold moved through his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in centuries. Then he pushed it away and began to laugh. "Brave words from a dying species," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone on the bridge to hear. "Continue the bombardment, destroy their shipyards, their factories, their military bases, leave them nothing but ruins and memories." The Dominion fleet spent the next month systematically destroying everything humans had built beyond their homeworld. Orbital stations returned to expanding clouds of dust and debris. Moon bases were cracked open and left to the void. Mars colonies were burned until nothing remained but glass. Ships were hunted down one by one, their crews given no chance to surrender, their vessels torn apart by plasma fire. When it was done, humanity was pushed back to their single, burning world. No ships, no stations, no hope. "They are finished," the weapons officer said with satisfaction. "They have nothing left. They cannot even leave their own atmosphere." "Then we will leave them to die slowly," Krelvex said. "Post a blockade. 12 ships should be sufficient. Let no ship enter or leave. Let no supplies reach them. In a generation, perhaps 2, they will be extinct. Their world will recover without them, and we can colonize it at our leisure. Move the fleet to the next target. There are other species that require our attention." The Dominion left Earth behind like a discarded toy. They had conquered hundreds of species this way. Humanity would be forgotten, just another failed civilization in the long history of galactic conquest. Another name in the archives that no one would ever read again. But the Dominion had made a terrible mistake, the worst mistake in their 10,000 years of rule. They had assumed humans were like other species. They had assumed that destruction would break the human spirit, that overwhelming force would shatter human will. They did not understand what humans were. They did not know what humans became when pushed to the edge of extinction. On Earth, the survivors gathered in the ruins of their civilization. The initial shock gave way to grief, and the grief gave way to something darker and more powerful. 5 billion people had died in the attacks and their aftermath. The cities were gone, reduced to craters and ash. The infrastructure was destroyed. The sky was dark with debris and poison. Food was scarce. Clean water was scarcer. By every measure of logic and history, humanity should have collapsed into chaos and despair. They should have turned on each other, fought over scraps, descended into the barbarism that had claimed so many other species. Instead, they began to build. In the first year after the attack, humans moved underground. They had no choice. The surface was poisoned, the air barely breathable, the radiation levels deadly in many areas, so they dug. They used every piece of surviving equipment, every tool they could salvage or improvise. They converted old mines into cities. They expanded subway systems into living spaces. They dug new tunnels with nothing but determination and desperation. The underground cities grew like roots spreading through the earth. Networks connected them, allowing trade and communication and cooperation. Hydroponic farms were built in vast caverns, using artificial light and recycled water to grow food. Purification systems cleaned the water from underground rivers. Air scrubbers worked constantly to keep the atmosphere breathable. Life continued, stubborn and relentless in the dark places beneath the ruined surface. General Marcus Webb had been a career military officer before the attack, stationed at a base in Colorado that had survived the initial bombardment by sheer luck. Now he stood before the Council of Survivors, a gathering of the remaining leaders from every nation that had once divided the planet. He was an old man, his hair turned white from the stress of the past months, his face lined with grief and exhaustion. But his eyes were sharp and his voice was strong. "The Dominion thinks we are finished," he said. His words echoed through the underground chamber, carrying to every ear and every heart. "They think we will simply die here alone and forgotten while they continue their conquest of the galaxy. They think we are like every other species they have crushed under their heel. They are wrong. We will survive. We will adapt. We will rebuild. And when we are ready, when we have the strength and the weapons and the numbers, we will make them remember the mistake they made when they attacked Earth." The council members nodded. There was no debate, no argument, no political posturing or national pride. For the first time in human history, every nation, every faction, every group with an axe to grind or a grudge to settle was united by a single purpose: survival and revenge. The old divisions seemed meaningless now. The old hatreds were nothing compared to the new hatred they all shared. They were no longer Americans or Russians or Chinese or any other nationality. They were humans. And they had a common enemy. The blockade ships orbited Earth for 10 years. Their crews grew bored and complacent. Nothing ever happened. No ships tried to break through the cordon. No signals were broadcast to the wider galaxy. The humans seemed to have accepted their fate, dying slowly on their ruined world just as the Dominion had intended. The blockade became a punishment posting, a place where troublesome officers were sent to waste away watching a dead planet. What the Dominion did not see was what was happening beneath the surface. What they could not know was that humanity had not given up. They had simply learned to be patient. Humans worked day and night in the underground factories. They studied the wreckage of Dominion weapons that had fallen to Earth during the bombardment. Plasma projectors, shield generators, communication arrays, navigation systems. Every piece of alien technology was examined, analyzed, and understood. Human scientists, freed from the competition and secrecy of the old nations, shared their knowledge freely. Engineers from different continents collaborated without borders or barriers. Progress that would have taken centuries in the old world happened in years in the new one. The first reverse-engineered plasma weapon was completed 3 years after the attack. It was crude and unreliable, but it worked. The first shield generator followed 6 months later. Then came faster-than-light communication. Then artificial gravity. Each breakthrough built on the last, each discovery opening new possibilities. But humanity did not stop at copying Dominion technology. They improved it. They combined it with their own innovations. They pushed boundaries that the Dominion had considered impossible. Dr. Lena Vasquez was the one who made the greatest breakthrough. She had been a theoretical physicist before the attack, working on problems that most people considered purely academic. Now she worked in a cramped laboratory 300 meters below the ruins of Sao Paulo. She had not seen the sun in 6 years. Her skin was pale, her eyes strained from endless hours staring at screens and equations. But her mind was as sharp as ever, perhaps sharper, focused by desperation and determination. "I've done it," she whispered, staring at the calculations on her screen. Her hands trembled as she checked the numbers again and again. "I've actually done it. This changes everything." She had discovered how to create artificial gravity wells, not the simple gravity plating that the Dominion used, but controlled, directed gravity that could be weaponized and shaped. It was a technology the Dominion did not have. It was a technology no species in the known galaxy had ever developed. And Elena Vasquez, working alone in a cave beneath a dead city, had cracked the secret. Within 2 years, humans had built their first gravity drive based on her work. A ship equipped with it could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. It could create gravity weapons that would crush enemy vessels like paper in a fist. It could generate shields that bent space itself around them, making them impervious to any conventional weapon. General Webb, now President Webb, by unanimous vote of the survivors, stood before the first completed warship in an underground hangar that had taken 5 years to carve from solid rock. The ship was called the Vengeance. It was not beautiful. Humans had no time for beauty. It was brutal and functional, every line and angle designed for one purpose: the destruction of their enemies. "How many can we build?" Webb asked, his voice quiet with awe. "With our current resources, 100 in the first year," the chief engineer replied. She was a young woman who had been a graduate student when the attack came. Now she led the largest engineering project in human history. "After that, we can increase production significantly. We've found asteroid deposits near Mars that the blockade ships haven't noticed. We've been mining them secretly for 3 years using stealth shuttles. We have more materials than we know what to do with." Webb smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who had waited 10 years for this moment. "Begin construction immediately and prepare the assault teams. We're going to take those blockade ships without firing a shot. I want the Dominion to never know what hit them." The assault happened on a quiet night, 10 years and 3 days after the first attack. The Dominion crews were asleep, secure in their belief that nothing would ever disturb their boring routine. Their sensors showed nothing unusual. They had stopped expecting trouble years ago. Earth was quiet. Earth was dead. There was nothing to fear. The human soldiers emerged from nowhere, using personal gravity devices to move through space without ships. They were invisible to Dominion sensors, which had never been designed to detect something so small and strange. They reached the hulls of the blockade ships like ghosts, cut through the metal with plasma torches, and entered without triggering a single alarm. The fighting was brief and brutal. Humans had spent 10 years training for this moment, practicing in simulators and mock-ups and endless drills. They knew the layout of Dominion ships from studying the wreckage. They knew the weak points. They knew where the crew quarters were, where the bridge was, where the engines and weapons could be disabled. By morning, all 12 blockade ships belonged to humanity. The crews were dead. The ships were being examined by human engineers, their remaining secrets added to the growing database of stolen technology. The blockade was broken. The cage was open. President Webb broadcast a message to Earth. It was the first public communication in 10 years, transmitted to every underground city and hidden settlement. "Citizens of Earth," he said, his voice carrying across the tunnels and cavern, "the blockade is broken. The stars are open to us once more. But we are not the same species that was attacked 10 years ago. We are stronger. We are smarter. We are united as we have never been before, and we are angry. The Dominion thought they could break us. Instead, they forged us into something new, something dangerous, something unstoppable. The universe tried to destroy humanity. It only made us stronger. Now it is time to show the galaxy what that means." Across the underground cities, in the tunnels and caverns and hidden factories, 5 billion humans cheered. The long night was over. The time for revenge had begun. And somewhere in the distant stars, the Dominion was about to learn the true cost of their arrogance. The Dominion received the first reports with confusion and denial. A border outpost had gone silent on the far rim of their territory. It happened sometimes. Equipment failed. Communications were disrupted by solar activity or cosmic interference. Nothing to worry about, the administrators assured themselves. Then another outpost went silent, and another, and another. A pattern emerged, spreading inward like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Within a week, 17 outposts along the outer rim had stopped responding. Scout ships were sent to investigate. They found only wreckage and silence. No survivors, no explanations, no clues about what had attacked them or where it had gone. Ambassador Krelvax, now Supreme Commander of the Dominion fleet by virtue of outliving his rivals and enemies, studied the reports with growing unease. He was older now, his scales faded from bright green to a dull gray, his movements slower and more deliberate. But his mind was still sharp, and something about the pattern of attacks disturbed him deeply. He remembered Earth, he remembered the human admiral's promise, delivered from the ruins of her world. "We will find you, we will hunt you, we will make you pay." But that was impossible. Surely that was impossible. The humans were trapped on their dying planet. They had no ships, no technology, no way to reach the stars. He had watched them die slowly for 10 years. He had received regular reports confirming their continued decline. Unless the reports were wrong, unless the blockade had been. "Send a reconnaissance force to Earth," he ordered, his voice tight with sudden fear. Full strength, 50 warships. I want to know what is happening on that planet. I want confirmation that the humans are still contained. The reconnaissance force assembled within days. 50 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet. It was enough firepower to conquer most species in the galaxy. It was sent to investigate a supposedly dead world, an overwhelming response to a nagging doubt. The fleet arrived at Earth expecting to find ruins and corpses and the slow death of a failed species. What they found instead was an empty world. The planet was there, orbiting its yellow sun just as it had for billions of years. The oceans still sparkled blue under the light. The continents were green again, recovered from the fires of the attack, healed by time and nature. But there were no cities visible from orbit, no signals emanating from the surface, no electromagnetic emissions of any kind, no signs of life at all. "Where are they?" the fleet commander demanded, his voice rising with panic. 5 billion people cannot simply disappear. Scan everything, find them. The scanners found nothing but plants and animals and empty ruins slowly being reclaimed by nature. No humans, no technology, no answer to the mystery. The answer came moments later, but not from the planet below. New gravity sensors, hastily installed after the strange reports from the rim, detected massive anomalies approaching from behind the moon. Something was moving toward them, something big. The human fleet appeared like shadows emerging from darkness. 100 ships, each one larger than anything the Dominion had ever built. Their hulls were black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, making them nearly invisible against the void of space. Their weapons were already powered, gravity wells spinning at their cores like contained stars. Admiral Sarah Chen, now 60 years old but still fierce, commanded the flagship Vengeance from its bridge. She looked at the Dominion fleet on her tactical display and smiled for the first time in years. She had waited so long for this moment. She had dreamed of it every night for a decade, and now it was finally here. "This is for everyone you killed," she said, her voice broadcast on all frequencies so the Dominion crews would hear it in their final moments. Fire. The battle lasted 7 minutes. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The Dominion ships could not match the human gravity drives, which allowed the Vengeance fleet to appear and disappear at will, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before the enemy could respond. They could not penetrate the gravity shields, which bent their weapons away into the void. Their tactics, perfected over 10,000 years of conquest, were useless against an enemy that had evolved beyond anything they could understand. Ship after ship exploded or was torn apart by gravity weapons. Crews died without ever seeing their attackers. Commanders issued orders that no one could follow. Panic spread through the Dominion ranks like fire through dry grass. When it was over, all 50 Dominion ships were destroyed. Wreckage floated in a spreading cloud around Earth, a memorial to Dominion arrogance. Not a single human ship was damaged. Admiral Chen sent a message to the Dominion homeworld. It was transmitted on every frequency, repeated endlessly so there could be no chance of missing it. The message contained no words, only an image, the wreckage of the Dominion fleet drifting silently around the planet they had tried to destroy. The message was clear: humanity was coming, and there was nothing the Dominion could do to stop them. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. It spread across star systems and sectors, consuming worlds and fleets and the old order of things, but it was not what the Dominion expected. It was not what anyone expected. Humans did not conquer like the Dominion. They did not seek to rule other species. They did not want slaves or tribute or submission. They had a simpler goal, purer and more terrifying: justice. They hunted down every Dominion military installation with patient, relentless determination. They destroyed every warship, tracked every fleet, eliminated every threat. They liberated every slave world, breaking chains that had bound some species for thousands of years. Populations that had forgotten what freedom meant suddenly found themselves free, staring up at human ships in confused wonder. The Velari were the first to ally with humanity. They had been among the earliest species conquered by the Dominion, their proud civilization reduced to servitude over generations. Now their ambassador, a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, stood before the United Earth Council in the great underground chamber that served as humanity's capital. "You remember the Dominion's cruelty," the ambassador said, his voice filled with emotion that transcended species. "We remember our own surrender, the shame of it, the despair. When we saw what you did, when we learned how you refused to break even when everything was taken from you, we knew that you were different from any species we had encountered. You represent something new in this galaxy, something that gives us hope. We wish to stand with you, to fight beside you, to help you finish what you have started." More species joined the coalition as news of the human victories spread. The Thornax, crystalline beings who communicated through patterns of light, pledged their advanced sensors and detection technology. The Kelvari, who had hidden their true numbers from the Dominion for centuries, emerged from their concealment with a fleet of their own. The mysterious void swimmers, ancient beings who lived in the spaces between stars, offered knowledge of pathways through the galaxy that no one else knew. What had begun as humanity's private war of revenge became something larger and more meaningful. A coalition of the oppressed, united against their former masters, fighting for a galaxy where strength did not give the right to dominate the weak. President Webb, now an old man in his final years, addressed the coalition assembly. Representatives from a dozen species filled the chamber, their varied forms and faces turned toward him with attention and respect. "We did not ask for this war," he said, his voice carrying the weight of everything humanity had suffered. "We did not want it. The Dominion attacked us without provocation. They killed billions of innocent people. They burned our cities and tried to break our spirit, but they failed, and now they will face the consequences of that failure, not because we are cruel, not because we want power or empire or dominion of our own, but because justice demands it. Because every species they have ever conquered deserves to see their oppressors fall. Because the galaxy must learn that there are some lines that cannot be crossed, some people who will not bow, some spirits that cannot be broken." The coalition fleet gathered near the Dominion homeworld for the final battle. It was the largest military force ever assembled in the recorded history of the galaxy. Human ships formed the core of the formation, their black hulls cutting through space like shadows given form. Around them flew the silver vessels of the Velari, elegant and swift. The crystalline ships of the Thornax sparkled with internal light. The living ships of the void swimmers pulsed with organic rhythms. 100 different designs from a dozen different species, united by a common cause. Supreme Commander Krelvax watched them approach from his palace on the Dominion homeworld. He was old now, ancient by the standards of his species, his scales almost white with age. 20 years had passed since he had ordered the attack on Earth. 20 years of watching everything he had built, everything his species had built over 10,000 years, crumble into dust. "We cannot win," his advisors told him, their voices heavy with despair. "Our fleets are destroyed, our outposts are taken, our allies have abandoned us. We must surrender, we must beg for mercy. Perhaps the humans will show clemency." Krelvax remembered Admiral Chen's words from 2 decades ago, spoken from the ruins of her burning world. "We do not surrender, we do not forgive, and we do not forget." "They will not show mercy," he said quietly. "We made sure of that when we burned their world. We taught them what the galaxy was like, and they learned the lesson too well. Now we will pay the price for that education." He was right. The Battle of Dominion Prime lasted 3 days. The Dominion forces fought desperately, knowing that this was the end of their empire, perhaps the end of their species. They threw everything they had against the coalition fleet. Ships that should have been in museums were pulled from storage and sent into battle. Civilian vessels were armed with whatever weapons could be mounted. Every able-bodied member of the species was conscripted into the defense. It was not enough. It could never have been enough. The coalition forces were too strong, too numerous, too determined. And at their heart were the humans, the species that had survived the unsurvivable, the people who had turned destruction into strength. On the 3rd day, human soldiers landed on the Dominion homeworld. They descended from the sky in drop ships, their black armor gleaming in the alien sun. They marched through the streets of the ancient capital, their boots echoing on stones that had been laid when humanity's ancestors were still living in caves. The Dominion citizens watched in silence from their windows and doorways. They had been the conquerors for 10,000 years. Now they were the conquered. Now they understood what it felt like. Admiral Chen, supported by medical equipment and the sheer force of her will, walked into the Dominion palace at the head of a column of soldiers. She was old now, her body failing, but she had refused to die until this moment. She had promised herself that she would see the end. She had earned this. She found Krelvax waiting for her in the throne room. He was alone, abandoned by guards and advisors who had fled or surrendered. He sat on the throne that had been occupied by Dominion rulers for 100 centuries, and he watched her approach with ancient, tired eyes. "You were right," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "You did exactly what you promised. You found us, you hunted us, you made us pay for every life we took." Chen looked at him for a long moment. She remembered the day he had ordered the bombardment of her world. She remembered standing in the ruins of her city, watching the fires burn, breathing air thick with ash and death. She remembered the faces of everyone she had lost. The memories had sustained her through 20 years of struggle. They had been her fuel and her purpose. "Yes," she said simply, "we did." "What happens now?" Krelvax asked. Will you kill me, destroy my people as we tried to destroy yours, take revenge for every life we took? We would understand it would be just. Chen was silent for a long time. She could feel the weight of the moment, the eyes of history watching her. She could do it. Every human who had survived the attack wanted it. 20 years of anger and grief and determination demanded it. The coalition would support her. The galaxy would applaud. But she thought about what Earth had become in those dark years underground. What humanity had become. They had been forged in fire, yes, made stronger by suffering, absolutely. But strength was not the same as cruelty. Power was not the same as tyranny. The true measure of civilization was not how it treated its friends, but how it treated its enemies. No, she said finally, we will not become what you were. We will not rule through fear. We will not conquer to destroy. Krelvax looked up at her, confusion replacing despair on his aged face. Then what? You will face justice, Chen said. Real justice. You will stand trial for your crimes against humanity and every other species you have wronged. Your people will learn the truth about what their government did in their name, the full scope of atrocities committed to maintain your empire. And then we will give them something the Dominion never gave to any of its subjects, a choice. They can join the coalition as equal partners. They can help build something better than what they destroyed. Or they can remain alone, isolated from the galactic community until they prove they have changed. That is not what I expected. Of course not, Chen smiled slightly, the first smile she had allowed herself in years. You don't understand humans, you never did. The universe tried to break us. It threw everything it had at our little world, fire and death and despair. And yes, we became stronger, but we also became wiser. We learned that the greatest strength is not the ability to destroy your enemies. It is the ability to choose not to build instead of burn, to heal instead of wound. She turned and walked away, leaving Krelvax alone in his empty throne room, thinking thoughts that no Dominion ruler had ever thought before. 50 years passed, 50 years of peace and growth and healing. Earth was transformed. The underground cities were abandoned, their tunnels and caverns preserved as museums and memorials. New cities rose from the ashes of the old ones, beautiful and vibrant, designed by the combined knowledge of a dozen species. They were cities of gardens and light, of soaring architecture and quiet parks, of humans and aliens living together in harmony. The planet itself had healed, the scars of the bombardment had faded, the atmosphere was clean again, the forests had returned, spreading across continents that had once been blackened wastelands. From orbit, Earth looked like it had before the attack, a blue and green jewel spinning in the void, but it was not the same, it was better. It was home to more than just humans now, a symbol of what the galaxy could become. The memorial stood in what had once been New York City. It was the largest structure on Earth, a wall of black stone that stretched for kilometers, listing the names of every human who had died in the first attack and the years of hardship that followed. 5 billion names, carved in letters small enough that you had to get close to read them, large enough that no one who came could miss the scale of the loss. People came from across the galaxy to see the memorial. Humans, of course, but also Velari and Thornax and Kelvari and 100 other species. They came to remember, they came to understand, they came to pay respect to the dead and learn from the past. At the heart of the memorial was a statue. It showed Admiral Sarah Chen, young and fierce as she had been on the day she sent her message to the Dominion, standing on a pile of rubble with her fist raised to the stars. Her face was determined and defiant, captured in stone for eternity. Beneath the statue was a plaque with words that had become the motto of the Galactic Coalition. They tried to break us, we became unbreakable. A young human girl stood before the statue with her grandfather. She was 10 years old, born into a galaxy at peace, knowing war and suffering only from history lessons and stories. Earth was just her home, a beautiful blue world full of life and hope and possibility. The attack was something that had happened before she was born, as distant as ancient history. Grandpa, she said, looking up at the fierce face of the statue, why did they attack us? The old man looked at the memorial around them. He had been a soldier once, long ago, in the final days of the war. He had fought in the liberation. He had seen things he would never speak of, done things he tried not to remember. The memories were fading now, softened by time and peace. Because they thought we were weak, he said, because they looked at our little world and saw nothing to fear. They didn't understand what humans are. What are we? He smiled and put his hand on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of new life beneath his aged fingers. We're survivors. When things are easy, when there's no threat and no struggle, we argue and fight among ourselves. We make mistakes. We can be petty and selfish and foolish. We forget what's important. But when everything seems lost, when the darkness closes in and there's no hope left, that's when we become something more. That's when we stop fighting each other and start fighting together. That's when we show the universe what we're really made of. The girl looked at the endless names on the memorial, 5 billion souls who had died so that she could stand here in peace. So many people died. Yes, and we honor them by building something worth dying for, the coalition, peace, freedom, a galaxy where no species has to live in fear, where strength is used to protect instead of dominate. That's their legacy. That's what they bought with their lives. He paused, looking up at the statue of Admiral Chen. The Dominion thought they were destroying us. Instead, they united us. Every challenge we face, every enemy we fight, every obstacle in our path only makes us stronger. That's the human way. That's what we learned in the dark years underground, and it's a lesson we'll never forget. In orbit above Earth, ships from 100 worlds came and went in an endless dance of commerce and cooperation. Trade vessels carried goods between star systems. Diplomatic shuttles ferried ambassadors to conferences and summits. Exploration craft headed to the unknown reaches of the galaxy, searching for new worlds and new species and new wonders. Humanity had spread to 1,000 worlds, building colonies and outposts and cities across the stars. They had become the heart of the coalition, the protectors of the weak, the champions of justice, the species that had refused to break. And it had all started with a single promise made by a woman standing in the ruins of her world. We do not surrender, we do not forgive, and we do not forget. The universe had tried to break Earth. Earth had become stronger from it, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the deepest reaches of space, far beyond the coalition's borders, something ancient stirred. Sensors that had watched the galaxy for 1,000,000 years detected the expansion of human influence. Old databases containing information about species that had risen and fallen before the first human ancestor had learned to walk upright, updated with new data. The architects had observed the galaxy since before recorded history began. They had seen species rise and fall, empires built and destroyed, civilizations flower and wither. They had watched the Dominion's brief 10,000-year reign and its inevitable end. They had seen it all before. But humans were different. They adapt too quickly, the first architect said. Its voice echoed through dimensions that mortal minds could not comprehend, through realms of thought and possibility that existed beyond normal space. They were nothing 50 years ago, nothing more than another failed species on the edge of extinction. Now they influence half the galaxy. They were tested, the second architect replied. As all species are tested, as the natural order demands, most break under the pressure. Some survive, but these humans, they do not merely survive, they grow stronger from every challenge. They transform adversity into advantage. This was not foreseen in any of our models. No, they are an anomaly, an impossibility made real. The architects had designed the trials of the galaxy long ago, in an age when the stars themselves were young. They had placed species like the Dominion in positions of power specifically to test developing civilizations. The strong were meant to prove themselves through suffering. The weak were meant to be culled. It was a harsh system, but it had worked for 1,000,000 years. It had produced species worthy of survival. But humans had done more than survive the test. They had broken the system entirely. What do we do? The first asked. Do we intervene? Do we design a new test? The second considered the question for a long moment, reviewing data that spanned eons of time and light years of space. It studied humanity's history, their evolution, their response to the attack and everything that followed. The resilience, the adaptability, the absolute refusal to break no matter what was thrown at them. The ability to transform enemies into allies, to turn destruction into creation, to emerge from darkness stronger than they entered it. We watch, it said finally. We have shaped the galaxy for 1,000,000 years, guided its development according to our designs. But perhaps it is time to see what the galaxy becomes when shaped by them. Perhaps they will show us something new, something we have not seen in all our long existence. And if they fail, then they fail and we continue as we always have. But I do not think they will fail. I think they will surprise us. They have already surprised us once. The architects retreated into their dimension of thought and memory, withdrawing from the physical universe to watch from a distance that could not be measured in light years. They would observe, they would wait, and they would see what humanity would become when given the chance to shape their own destiny. Because the universe had tried to break Earth, and Earth had become unbreakable. The story was far from over. In truth, it was only beginning. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space and time, the architects watched with something that, in beings so ancient and powerful, might have been called hope.